We're just chatting about, oh, now I'm on mic. We're just, I don't think, are we recording right now? Oh, well then, no more Hallmark movie talk. No. Okay. There's certain things in life we can all gather around and agree are just pure good, unless you're an old crank, and I don't want to hear about it. All right, Justin. You seem like a Hallmark movie kind of guy. I knew it. Pollard for sure loves Hallmark movies. I don't know who set these 9 o'clock Monday morning meetings, but they are sure as heck getting me going for the week. So thanks, everybody, for being here. I believe it is 9 o'clock. How many people do we have online?
We have one member,
Oh,
two members.
who's online?
Gary Hansen, Senator Howe.
Okay, if any other legislators join, will you let me know? All right. All right, good morning, everybody. It's 9 o'clock, and I'll call this meeting to order. Welcome. Today is December 15th. This is the meeting of the Electricity as Vehicle Fuel Working Group, and as noted, we have a quorum present. So thanks again for being here. It's always nice to see everyone. You should have received the minutes by email. Has everybody had a chance to review them? And is there a motion to approve the meeting minutes from last time?
I move to approve.
Well, thank you. So moved. Anybody do I need a second on that? Oh, okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Excellent. The motion prevails and the minutes are approved. So today we have 3 speakers, and then I have a little bit of discussion at the end. As you all, I hope, noted, we're asking for your comments and feedback and thoughts on what you'd like to see as part of the recommendations. We are going to only talk about mine today, just as an example, not because they are a priority by any means, but just as an example of what kind of feedback we're looking for. So we'll save that for the end, and then encourage you to continue sending in your ideas. Again, they don't have to be on the form. I received some just plain in an email. What we're trying to do is get those comments ahead of time and make them available to everybody. They might inspire you to think of something you hadn't thought about. They might inspire you to think about something in opposition to that or something that's problematic. So we want people to be able to see that ahead of time so that when we do get all of the discussion and ideas together, we have good conversation and we can come up with a valuable report. So I think our timing is great. Even though we canceled 2 weeks ago, we had several issues with speakers. And so thanks for your grace in that. But with that, I think we'll get started. So we have 3 presentations today. We have the first, I'm going to talk about them and then we'll get going here. So our first speaker is from Mike Mascalier, who's Chief Commercial Officer of the Aspire Center. He'll be here online. Then we have a presentation from Utah DOT, Lyle McMillan, US DOT Strategic Technologies Director, and a man named Leif Elder, who's the UDOT Legislative Affairs Director. And then in the room, we have Matt Cernick, a personal friend of mine, who is going to be presenting from Thermo King. So we'll look forward to that. And is that Steve Elkins? Oh, Representative Elkins just joined. So welcome, Representative. It's good to see you. And we'll get started here. So with that, I think we have online Michael Mascalier, Chief Commercial Officer of the Aspire Center. And as a reminder to everyone in the room, when I call on you to ask a question, if you could introduce yourself and the group that you represent or the organization you represent, that would be helpful to the people that are online. So with that, Mr. Mascalier, are you on?
I am. Can you hear me okay?
We can. Welcome.
Thank you. Appreciate the invitation. Let me go ahead and share and make sure that you can see my screen. All right. Everybody see that okay?
Okay. Yes, and just note, members, we do not have a copy of his presentation, so don't look for it. Okay, back to you.
Yep, thank you. All right. So good morning, everybody. My name is Mike Mascalero. My role is Chief Commercial Officer, so I was trying to take all the good things that are happening out of USU Aspire and get them into the real world. So had the opportunity to present to the Minnesota Transportation Alliance about 3 weeks ago. That's where we met Senator Johnson. So appreciate the follow-up opportunity to share a little bit about what we're doing in Utah. All right, so I'm going to take hopefully about 20 minutes, allow a lot of time for questions, hope to spark your curiosity and say we want to do a lot of what they're doing and please show me how. So do a little bit of an overview. I'm going to show you some successful commercial deployments out there. We have what we call a Utah Electrification Initiative funded by State Bill 125 in 2023, signed by the governor. So we're in our third year of that. We're doing system level modeling of the whole state and individual fleets. I'm going to show you some of the deployments that we're doing. Touch briefly on the connected and autonomous vehicle piece that fits in nicely with that. And then Utah has a dry port. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that, which is also key to some of the work that we're doing. And then standards, which is a topic not a lot of people love, but it's essential to getting interoperability and deployment. All right. So Aspire is a National Science Foundation funded engineering research center focused on electrification of transportation. This is a graphic showing big picture vision. We've got over 60 partners, 10 universities, including University of Auckland in New Zealand. While we are a collection of universities, we also have a lot of partners in industry that I'm going to show you. And we're not just there doing research, it's catalyzing some of these practical transitions and electrification of transportation. So things like improving the grid resilience, economic growth, quality of life, air quality is a big piece of it. And of course, one of the most important things is job creation. And we're involved definitely in that. So what is Aspire? This is what we jokingly refer to as the cake graphic. It says that we're involved in all modes of transportation. So everything from light duty, medium and heavy duty, buses, heavy rail, light rail, even electrified aviation, and then all sources of energy. So geothermal, photovoltaic, anything that makes sense for the state. 4 areas of research, starting on the far right: transportation systems, which is where do the vehicles go and where do they stop? Power systems, how do you get the energy to the point of use, including things like battery systems and grid-tied, grid-forming converters. On the far left, data analysis and fusion is a huge piece of it. Without data, we don't really know where we want to go. So we use that to optimize the overall deployment of the system and be able to predict where it's going to be in 10, 20, 30 years. And adoption is a big piece. So we do engage the public and convey things about where we're at with acceptance and economic impact. So if you drill down a little bit, then projects, we're not just doing what's out there today, although we're not ignoring it. So some of you are probably familiar with level 2 and level 3 DC fast chargers. So we're also looking at things like megawatt wireless, charging systems, electrified roadways, so charge as you drive, system of systems, which links it all together, the vehicles, the infrastructure, the energy. And then workforce pathways is a huge piece because without a trained staff, you can't pull this off. We have about 70 industry and innovation members. On the left-hand side, you see entities like ABB and Schneider Electric directly involved in the infrastructure piece. You see OEMs like Ford, Packard, Kenworth, and Toyota that are involved. A lot of the software providers, big names like Denso and Toyota and Honda are directly involved with us. And on the right-hand side, you see a lot of the national labs like NREL, Idaho National Lab, and about 10 of the state-level DOTs, including Illinois Tollway. We're working with Pennsylvania Turnpike, among others. So what do the numbers look like? We get about $20 million a year from the National Science Foundation. We're in our 6th year out of a potential of 10, so we're focused now on commercialization. You can see the additional money that's come in. We run a every other year conference called Curve. That happens typically in Park City or Logan, and that's a great place to attend to figure out everything that's going on. So have generated a lot of IP and trying to bring in additional industry and innovation members. On the left-hand side, this is what we call the EVR. So it is a 3-lane quarter-mile test track, and I'm going to show you a little bit more about what we do. But that new building is an additional 20,000 square feet. It was extended, and the roadway was extended from 1 lane to about 3. a couple years ago, and you can see an example on the right of a megawatt wireless charger we're doing. So P3 is key to all of this. There's Utah Pilot, which I'm going to give you a better example of some of the things that we're doing. It's both a commercial deployment and an R&D test bed. Working with Indiana DOT and Purdue University, who just deployed a 1/4 mile 200 kilowatt. And then the UEI, I'm going to show you a little bit more about that for the statewide program. Florida State Route 16, it'll be a brand new installation. They're going to electrify 3/4 of a mile out of a 5-mile section to demonstrate interoperability among vehicle classes. I've been working closely with the Nebraska DOT, who's piloting both a dynamic and a static charge system, and also the Pennsylvania Turnpike, to name a few. So this is, I think we have a lot of expertise and experience to help guide it. So if we're interested in heading down a similar path in Minnesota, would encourage you to think about shared public infrastructure. For example, if you have one fleet go off and design their system and it's only used by them, the cost per mile or per kilowatt hour is going to be higher. So think about it at a statewide level, which is what I'm going to talk about. So what we've done is we start with commuter and light rail, which both exist in Utah, and there are intermodal sites along the way. And then install multi-megawatt substations, coordinate the grid loading so that, for example, if a light rail or heavy rail comes by and consumes multiple megawatts, you can throttle back maybe some of the cars or the buses that are charging at less than a megawatt. So coordinated grid loading is key. And then fast charging for buses and passenger vehicles. We actually have an intermodal station in downtown Salt Lake now that's doing this. And then electric roads can leverage all of that infrastructure along the corridor to complement it. So my focus is commercialization, just show you some of the examples, but it goes across the board. We talked about a few of them, but we're able to do what we call smart energy management. So that's basically looking at what the predicted load is and what the predicted capacity on the supply side is, and making sure that the two of those match and you don't have to put in unnecessary additional infrastructure. So we also just recently formed a nonprofit about 1 month ago. So over on the right-hand side, you see a graphic. So it shows the different campuses. It shows where some of the key stakeholders are, and then we're our industry and innovation members. So you can see that it spans the nation. We'll just skip that one. The big picture, the goal is not to do what we just talked about only, not national. We also have an international reach. We've got, I think, 8 different countries outside the US that we're working with. And think of it in the context of, we want to become the NASA of electrification, if you're familiar with that, and have societal impact worldwide and have a coordinated activity. So growth targets over the next 5 years, continue to bring in university research money. We talked about some of the P3 deployments. Services business up at that roadway, we do testing of some of the different suppliers and OEMs on the vehicle side, and make sure that they're safe to operate out in the environment and also are interoperable. And also looking at donations. So many times people are skeptical about, does this stuff really work? So I want to show you an example. I was previously the CEO of this company. I come from the private sector and circled back to the university a couple of years ago. Antelope Valley Transit Authority in Lancaster, outside of LA, first to convert to 100% electric. So many times you have to think about it big picture. If you dip your toe in the water, it's not going to typically be cost effective. So they started out, they've been 100% electric for about 5 years. Today they have about 80 buses. They have about 15 of high power en route wireless chargers. The challenge they had were over 300-mile routes, and the buses only had a range of 155 miles. So if you look at the way this was done, you typically say if you want more range, you add more battery. It's like putting more fuel in the tank, but that adds additional weight. So typical bus at the time was about 150 miles range. So you think, okay, I want to get up to 200 miles. I add more battery, the cost goes up, the vehicle weight goes up. So what we did is put in 15 of these en route wireless chargers. So you can actually you can remove some of the capacity on the bus, and then you can extend the range and reduce the gross vehicle weight. And then if you look at it from overall fleet standpoint, their transition, they started with 102 buses. So it said, okay, we're going to plug all these in overnight. You can see the total cost, CapEx, fleet and chargers, about 121 million. And then if you add wireless to that strategy, you can go back and reduce the number of buses to what you started with. The fleet cost goes significantly down. Charger cost goes up a little bit, $25 million savings over 12 years. And then if you took it one step further and said, okay, I'm going to optimize and remove some of the depot chargers. I'm going to lighten up the battery packs. You can actually save about 33 million if you're able to optimize. So the message here is to think about it at a system level and not just think about a first deployment, but engage with the fleets running trucks, engage with the transit operators, think about it all from a system level so you can reduce the overall cost. So Utah Electrification Initiative, State Bill 125, and mentioned it at the beginning. So it's all about meaningful jobs, resilient communities. There is an air quality inversion issue in Salt Lake, typically during the winter, so we're addressing that also. Collaboration with UDOT. I know you've got Lyle coming on next, who I know well. So Carlos Braceras, who's the head of UDOT, is actually the chair of this overall initiative. So he's directly in tune with what we've got going on. And we're not just going out telling people what to do, we're engaging them, showing what impact it's going to have over time. I read through some of the legislature you have with this working group. There are some similar themes here. There are 9 different industry advisory boards, 2 people that chair each of those, and you can see the areas that they're focused in, ranging from on-and-off-road heavy-duty vehicles and the electric vehicle charging infrastructure and power generation, transmission, storage, and distribution, and workforce. So this is what the ecosystem looks like. And market-driven, 30-year vision, 10, 20, 30-year roadmap, thinking about how to intelligently communicate between the grid, traffic management systems, and the vehicles that are on there, steady use of the grid, and then also at the same time be able to predict with this new innovation, how do you create and train a dynamic workforce? It's going to be needed to support it. So a couple of quick examples of what we're doing. So upper left, these are all, we have data on vehicle movement. For example, we know where 30,000 of the heavy duty trucks are coming through the state. We understand by working with the 39 different utilities in this state, which is a work in progress, the generation, transmission, distribution, storage, and what their plans are for the future, technology that's becoming available, and create actionable insights for the state. A couple of examples. So working with fleets, I'll show you what one of those looks like, electrified aviation, and a couple of pieces of what the comprehensive model looks like. This one I like a lot. So we're modeling what I call the what, when, and where. So you can see it's different decades, 34, 44, 54. It shows in a proactive way both spatial and temporal resolution. So where do we put the chargers, what types of chargers, and when should we install those? And the idea is through simulation, we minimize the overall system cost. We can compare different outcomes. We all know that nothing ever goes as planned, so we can look at scenarios as they evolve. And if you use your imagination, you can see the I-15, I-80 corridor, that's the light brown. So that's where it predicts we should put electrified roads, not every single roadway, but heavily trafficked roadways. And also shows where we should put some of the lower power and higher power stationary chargers. This is a quick example of how do you match power supply with demand. So this is on freight. And what we did is looked at, on the left-hand side, if you just said, I'm going to go ahead and put out infrastructure, you can see that the demand exceeds supply. In the middle, if you take advantage of, where you take into consideration the time of use costs, you can actually save on some of the infrastructure, and you're in a situation where you almost have the demand not exceeding supply. And then if we are able to advise users of the roadways when and where to charge and at what power level, we can actually optimize and not have the demand exceed the supply. Quick example of a fleet. So it doesn't make sense in all cases for this operator who does anything from container moves that are 2 miles up to a 300-400 mile delivery going from Salt Lake up to Idaho. So we analyze the total cost of ownership. We look at the dollars per mile, includes everything, and we can suggest to them what they should do for converting. And in this case, it actually says that some of it doesn't yet make sense for converting to electric, it should remain internal combustion engines. We ran a workshop, which is interesting, kind of brought everybody together. Another thought and suggestion, we ran it at the Utah Trucking Association. We deployed this dashboard, which is interactive at High Valley Transit. So they're the entity in Park City that'll be supporting the Olympics in 2034. And they have 8 electric buses now, adding another, I believe it's 12 to 14 in the middle of next year. So we can show them where the buses are, what's the state of charge, reliability, availability of the charging stations. A little more detail just so you can see what the dashboard looks like. This is now servicing about 150 of the chargers in the state of Utah. Cybersecurity, real-time visibility. A couple of the other assets that we produce. So it's a jobs brochure, which this one is, in my opinion, particularly impressive. And the one on the right, we've been focused on helping putting in EV charging infrastructure in the national parks, which, as you probably know, are really popular during the summer and other months. Workforce development. So not only the typical bachelor's, master's, PhD degrees, but also associate degrees, community college, how to engage kids in middle school and high school in STEM. We're actively involved in that, on-the-job training, and try to provide paths to onboard to get to training for people of any skill level and point in their lifetime. The UEI, this is the newsletter example that we're distributing. This is the annual report that we just produced, and I will get these slides to you. I already sent them to Danny, and he should be able to post them, but there's the QR codes if you want to look at full report of the highlights. Some of the projects we're doing, a Class 8 Kenworth truck, first regional haul over 500 miles. That's the wireless charger I showed at the beginning. Another one is right outside the Utah Inland Port, which is right just south of the Salt Lake City Airport. It'll be running about a third of the freight on a daily basis from Salt Lake up into Cache Valley, which is where Utah State University is, but running real freight. Some of the middle mile. So this is Kenworth Class 6 box truck. We just installed a quarter-mile of electrified roadway. If you see where the red is at the bottom, that's the entrance and exit to the Union Pacific Intermodal Terminal. So we're going to be doing a ride and drive in the spring to demonstrate to everybody what's possible. Just some construction pictures so everybody knows that it's real. You can see some of the vaults being placed, the charger. There's also 2 megawatt hours and 1 megawatt of stationary storage. You can see there in the middle left. Some of the additional photos, this is what it looks like when it's going into the ground. We obviously placed the truck over there, but you can see what the coils look like in the roadway. And there, of course, is the finished product. So it's installed now, it's paved over. We're actually running tests already to verify it, a quarter mile, running at about 100 kilowatts as it drives. And then this is a quick view of what the system looks like from Purdue, also installed up at the EVR. And I mentioned that part of our role is to do testing to standards and interoperability. So we're doing that. This is from about 6 weeks ago up at the EVR. This is the Purdue project that I mentioned. So this is a slightly earlier version. They just announced last week, I believe it was, actually installing it on that truck you see in the middle. The video you see on the right-hand side, they originally tested it pulling the receiving plate on a trailer, but this is deployed now, running at about 200 kilowatts. So working closely with the Indiana DOT and Cummins, who's a partner right there in Columbus, Indiana. And then connected and autonomous, I'm just going to go through this quickly. It came out of the Curve conference that I mentioned. Some of the entities we're working with, you recognize, I'm sure. Utah DOT, Lyland team, Panasonic Einride. So if you think about it, we're believers that in many cases wireless makes sense. And of course, if you have an autonomous system, there's no driver, nobody to plug in. So wireless and autonomous go hand in hand. So some graphics from compliments of Cavenue. So what they view as Roads 2.0, it's beyond line of sight. And I know one of the big focuses of this working group is how do you pay for all this? So they're looking at things like what do the next gen user fees look like? This is from UDOT, just some of the things that they're doing. So there's onboard equipment, back-end equipment, roadside, the view that they're looking at not just the state of Utah, but some of the adjacent states like Wyoming and Colorado. connected vehicle. If you've ever driven up I-80 in the winter, coming from Salt Lake up to some of this ski areas, you'll be at some point probably behind the plows that are clearing the roads. So visibility is important. So a lot of the connected and autonomous vehicles are aimed at trying to help this, identify disabled vehicles, vary the speed limits, try to help users who are stranded, and keep things moving efficiently and safely. And then Einride, so they've got this model, which is interesting because I know we're talking about, again, how do you pay for all this? So they've got a freight capacity as a service model. So putting in place contracts with some of the fleet operators, helping them through assessment, planning, deployment, and operations. So basically a business model that says you charge based on how many pounds of freight you move over distance. Okay, so quick graphic of some of the capabilities that they have, some of the fleets that they're working with, and they already have some trucks in Utah, and we're working with them on trying to expand that. And then the other key to it, so Utah Department of Air Quality, they probably heard of the EPA Clean Ports, so they won $110 million there. Going to show you a little bit more about this, but it's all centered around electric trucks, cargo handling equipment, and all the infrastructure to reduce emissions and improve regional air quality. So 3 of the programs, it's over 200 million total, including the one I just talked about. And they have up to 90% cost share. So if you remove a diesel truck from the fleet, you can get 90% credit for that towards the purchase of a new vehicle. Clean heavy duty vehicles targeted at class 6 and 7, and then another one which is focused on emissions reduction. So there is some funding coming from various sources. This one, again, we're talking about business models, so I'm sure you've heard of charging as a service at this point, similar to software as a service. So think about it as a full design, build, operate, and maintain model. This one has 12 megawatts total capacity for EVs. About half of that comes from DER, so stationary storage, and the rest of it comes from the grid concurrent. They can do almost 9 megawatts. This is technically pending release of some DOE funds, but another 19 trucks, and shows a new business model as well as a way to distribute both DC and AC, which can be more efficient to the charging infrastructure. All right, getting close to the end. So standards, wireless. This is something I'm gonna touch on quickly. I co-chair the standards committee for the J2954, and then Regan Sain, who's the center director, co-chairs those standards for the dynamic or in motion piece of it. I do heavy duty, which is buses and trucks. So it's creating interoperability, ways to align, way to test and validate, and then do an EMC, EMF to make sure everything is safe. So it's the only standard that does both the equipment that goes in the ground as well as what's on the vehicle. It is an international standard. There's a UL piece of it to make sure that it's safe, UL 2750. And we are now one of the third parties actually doing that third bullet, so testing for safety and exposure to electromagnetic fields according to the standard. So in the month of October, November, we actually had 4 different suppliers. So we had Honda, Denso, Electrion, and NREX for the suppliers for the in-motion wireless, and did simultaneous testing to look at things like radiated emissions, test the safety limits, and also interoperability. This is, again, just quickly what it looks like as a reminder. These are the pieces that we look at. So they had antennas, test equipment up there, driving vehicles, looking at real-time power transfer. So with that, I'll go ahead and conclude, and hopefully you've got a bunch of good questions you've jotted down, and happy to answer them. So thanks everybody for your time.
Thank you, Michael. I have a quick question. You showed the nonprofit that you had just created, and I noted that you have a partner in Minnesota. Is that the university, or who is your Minnesota partner?
It's technically Minnesota DOT or the Minnesota Transportation Alliance. We have a separate invite to talk to Minnesota DOT. I think it's on the 7th of January. So looking forward to that. I think it's more of a technical crowd, from what I understand, through some of the people that we met in November.
Yeah, so thank you, Michael. So as a reminder, I watched this presentation, which was a little bit more focused on the actual charging at the recent Transportation Alliance meeting. And the reason I wanted Michael to come back and talk to us is because my mind was just kind of opened, like, oh, so this is the future of charging, or maybe, I mean, possibly, seems like it would be. And it really changed how I thought about this working group and, whether we're really going to be talking about plug-in chargers for the very near future, or if there is work happening, which obviously there is, to expand how people charge. And so thank you, Michael, very much for bringing that. I know we all do have an electronic copy of his presentation.
Yep.
And the other reason that I think today works out great for listening to him is as we move into the time where we want to think about our recommendations as a or as a working group, keep in mind in Minnesota, we have the Minnesota Road Research Center. We have a road testing facility up by Monticello. We have the University of Minnesota. In the last week, I've been talking with the dean of CSE, College of Science and Engineering. I think there are some opportunities for us to encourage this partnership, and that might be one of the, well, I know it's a recommendation that I'm going to put forward. But so with that, I'll open it up to the group. But again, really, this broadened my mind totally of what charging might look like even 10 years from now. And so with that, I'll see, are there any questions in the room? Eric Rudin from MnDOT.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. Eric Rudin, Minnesota Department of Transportation. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the cost of installing these facilities, especially if you've done any comparison for, what does like a fast charger cost versus this technology, kind of just what the comparison would be.
Sure. Yeah, it's a great question. It's probably a 2-hour discussion or more. And part of the reason I put this slide back up here is what we're doing is a simulation statewide to minimize overall system costs. So while I could probably dive into saying what does it cost to install a 300 kilowatt DC fast charger versus electrified road, I think most importantly what we can do is we could work with you to model the state of Minnesota and look at minimizing the overall system costs. So knowing the what, when, and where to put the chargers rather than just saying having an individual fleet do it. But the metric that comes out of this is cost per kilowatt hour or cost per mile. And we have simulations that we could actually do that for the entire state if you're interested, and happy to offer that service. So hopefully at least give you a partial answer to your question without giving any hard numbers.
Eric, do you have a follow-up? Are you good?
No, Madam Chair, thanks. It's an interesting topic. I mean, when we were looking at the sort of the number of fast chargers we would need to sort of cover the entire state and the costs associated with that, it'd be interesting to kind of get the comparison of this type of technology instead.
Yeah, something I find so exciting is they're doing so much work in Utah already, and they have partners with industry and suppliers and trucks, and I mean, it's like we can, if this is something of interest, I know personally it is, but for the working group, we latch on. They've already done a lot of that work, and I'm sure that data would not be difficult to come up with. So thanks for the question. Yes, one more in the room, and then we'll go online.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. John Houselot, Minnesota Trucking Association. Fascinating. Fascinating. Interested, so if I understand the technology, the electromagnetic coils in the roadbed are attached to the grid. First, I want to confirm that. Is that correct?
Yes, correct.
Okay.
The energy comes
So-
from the, yep.
So in all of your work, which clearly is you're focused on the tech and proof of concept and delivery, do you have a policy piece that talks about, so you're still drawing from the grid, and so part of our task is how do we capture the fact that, okay, vehicles are being charged, they're getting the benefit, but then we're trying to capture the potentially tax that to go back into the roadbed itself. It's sort of this, do you have a policy piece of your work here that sort of informs, how to best accomplish this and lessons learned. I know you can't share all that today, but interested in learning more about that.
Yeah, happy to have a separate discussion. The answer is yes. Part of the modeling, we can make recommendations. If you remember the actionable insights that we provide back to the legislators who authorized SB 125, we can give them some of those recommendations based on the cost of the system. And also recommended, I'll call it business models, come from the private sector. I read through some of what Danny sent to me on different models you have on charging for a flat rate or a prorated rate. I know Lyle's going to talk about the RUC charge. So that's exactly what we're trying to figure out is how do you charge for it? So the nice part about it is all this data goes to the grid. So for electrified roadway, we can actually tell how many kilowatt hours an individual vehicle received. So we would be able to charge for the energy that they have utilized. And likewise for a light duty, medium duty vehicle. So we can make suggestions on what the business model looks like, what the cost recovery looks like based on the modeling that I talked about.
Good, John. Okay, one more in the room, and then Senator Howe, I'll call on you after Representative Elkins. So Representative?
Thank you. I'm interested in learning more about the Antelope Valley Transit use case because to me it seems like bus rapid transit would be the perfect initial trial for doing the in-the-road inductive charging. You've got regular high-frequency transit, a relatively limited number of vehicles that would have to be modified or purchased to take advantage of it, but it seems to me that would be a really good use case. So on the Antelope Valley example, are they using in-road inductive charging, or do they have stationary wireless chargers of some other kind?
Well, you were fading a little bit there towards the end. Sorry, the volume went down on my side.
Yeah, I was wondering if the Antelope Valley Transit, if they have, what form of wireless charging are they using? Have they built coils into the road, or they have stationary charging stations?
They are 250 kilowatt static wireless chargers. Quantity is about 16 today. It's at 5 different hubs and also at the depot.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
but you're exactly right. Very familiar with BRT, and it's the perfect application to do in-motion wireless. And then you could also say at a stop, you could operate an in-motion wireless roadway as a static charger when it's coming up to one of the stops along the route. So, yes.
Great.
Thank you.
Senator Howe online.
Well, thank you, and very, very interested in this. The question I have though is when with the installation of that in the roadway, how long have you had that in the roadway, and as you have any problems with the connectivity of that and the resilience of that system in that roadway, and then what happens when you had to resurface or redo one of those roadways? Any ideas what the issues are going to be as we go? Because we end up having to do a lot of maintenance on our roads because of the frost heaves and that type of thing. What are we looking at? Do we have any data on that type of resiliency?
It's a great question, and it's a question that frequently comes up. Very valid. We do have some preliminary data. It is still a fairly new technology, putting things in the roadway. So, of course, we've experienced some problems. We're working on solutions that go both in asphalt and concrete, ranging from, say, an in situ pour of concrete with the elements already in the roadway to these subsystems, precast that are dropped in the roadway. The Electreon system also mostly works in asphalt. So it typically sits 3 to 4 inches below the surface. So you'd be able to do the standard road maintenance, from what I understand, by milling and then repaving over that. So hasn't been perfect so far, to be honest. We've had some good lessons learned. We've learned most by talking to the DOTs and understanding what problems they typically come up with, how long the section of roadway should be before there's a gap in it, if you will, for stress relief. So it's something we're actively working on. NREX, for example, based in Norway, they're doing accelerated life testing of pavements. So happy to share more about that with you as time goes by.
Senator Howe, do you have a follow-up?
No, thank you. I think that collecting due to the fact that we have a constitutional requirement to collect for those folks that drive on the right roadway, I think some of that challenge is going to be for collecting for these folks that drive on our roadway that are from out of state or we don't have good data on. So that's going to be a challenge, I believe.
Yeah, I agree. Michael, I have a quick question just about the logistics of it. When a vehicle drives over this charged or this electrified section, does it show up on their meter immediately so they know when to exit?
It can. Right now, we can show real-time energy transfer. As far as when to exit, we haven't gotten to that point yet. But the data piece, getting the vehicle to the cloud from both the in-road elements and also the vehicles is fairly easy. One of the considerations, as you brought up, is the latency. So how long does it take to get that data there? And it's something that we're actively working on, trying to make sure it's real-time information. So, yeah, I think it's where we also hope to learn from Minnesota DOT and others about what's the best way to implement that.
And then I also remember from your presentation at the Transportation Alliance, you talked about the separation between the pavement surface and the receiver on the vehicle. And I think you said 8 inches. Could you just talk about that just very briefly?
Sure. Yep. Yeah, I took that out of here. But yeah, the typical air gap, as we call it, is about 8 inches or 200 millimeters. So it's at a distance that's flexible enough to accommodate light, medium, and heavy-duty vehicles. So you just adjust the way you control the air gap and where you mount the receiver on the vehicle such that you can have interoperable systems amongst vehicle classes. But typical is about 8 inches, yes.
Okay. Are there any questions online? Any others? Austin? Is anybody else in the room have a question? All right. Well, Michael, thank you so much. And I know we'll be in touch as I have more questions from people at Minroad, people at the university. I think this is a very exciting topic. So thanks for being here and sharing your expertise.
You bet. Thanks so much.
All right, excellent. And as I said, we do have access to his presentation online. And I'm going to ask also that we post a copy of Utah Senate Bill 125, just so we can kind of see how that legislation was structured. If anybody else has other info that they want from that, I'm sure we can get it from Michael. So thank you again.
You bet. Thank you.
All right. And get inside. It looks cold where you are. All right, we're going to move now to another Utah friend, Lyle McMillan, Utah DOT Strategic Technologies Director, and Leif Elder, who's their Legislative Affairs Director. They're also online, Lyle and Leif. And folks in the room and online, we do have a copy of their presentation. So as they get ready, you might remember we've been hearing from Utah. We heard from them at the last meeting about their collection systems, and Representative Elkins and I wanted to get a little bit more insight into that and how they're moving forward. So I think you will find this very interesting. I can see you're on now, so I'll stop talking.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Excellent. All right, I'm going to share now. All right. Does it say road usage charge program on your
does.
screens?
Yep, it's the one we have in our hands also.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Okay. As the chairwoman said, my name is Lyle McMillan. I'm the Director of Strategic Technologies at the Utah Department of Transportation, and I have on the line with us today as well, Leif Elder, who is our Director of Legislative Affairs. And we've been asked to talk a little bit about Utah's road usage charge program. And as Michael mentioned before, we have a really interesting program going on here in little old Utah out west. And one of the things that we tried to accomplish was trying to figure out how to help people pay the way for transportation the way that they would in EVs the way that they would in gas cars. And so let's start real quick with something you may have already seen before, but this is a national look at the way that EVs are being helped to pay for the nation's transportation systems. Anything in green indicates that those states have passed an annual fee. Anything in yellow means that legislation has been introduced. And then the little lightning symbols mean that the white ones have been, legislation's been introduced for an EV charging tax at the pump, so to speak. And then the black ones show that the tax has been enacted. And then if you have that crosshatch, you see that there are about 4 states, of which Utah is one of them, and that's why we've been asked to speak with you today, that have passed a road usage charge or a mileage-based user fee. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that today. First, I'd like to mention that this is not new. Utah's legislature has been working on this, as you can see, since 2003. So over 20 years, and it started with the realization that EVs were not going away, and that in the future we would see a much bigger percentage of electric vehicles who don't pay gas tax on Utah's roads. And so they asked for a study. And in that study, there were some recommendations, and those recommendations came to fruition in 2020 with Utah's road usage charge program. And just for some perspective, there are just over 3 million vehicles in Utah's overall fleet. And of those, about 5% are some part of plug-in hybrids, gas hybrids, or EVs. And of EVs, if you see, look there on the right, 1 out of every 5 new cars being registered in the state of Utah is an electric vehicle. And so we have seen 50% year over year increases in EVs on Utah's roads for the last 8 years in a row. So that brings us to the reason why I'm here today, and we're going to talk about Utah's road usage charge program. And basically, we wanted to, we started, and I'll talk a little bit about that later when we talk about how we've been trying to reduce costs. But basically, we have 2 options or 2 technologies that we use to enable people in the program to provide their mileage to us. And one of them is telematics, which comes directly from the car, and another is basically an app that allows the users to take a picture of their odometer that we then convert into the mileage-based user fee. We knew that people would be concerned about privacy, and so we wanted it to be voluntary, which we'll talk about in a second. But basically, we still have a registration fee because it is voluntary. So anybody with an EV can either pay the registration fee or they can join the road usage charge program. And then there's an agreement, and in that agreement, we agreed not to do anything with their data. In fact, we have hired a third party to collect that and only provide us with the mileage that we then convert into the cost. There were 3 types of vehicles initially in the program. You can see EVs, plug-in hybrids, and gas hybrids. We quickly realized that plug-ins and gas hybrids weren't necessarily conducive to this type of program in terms of cost effectiveness. So we, 2 years ago, when we re-upped with our new vendor, we eliminated eligibility for plug-in hybrids and gas hybrids. And you'll see we have a couple hundred of them grandfathered, but they are slowly transitioning out. And then it was really important that this program be voluntary and that it be technology forward. And we'll talk a little bit about that in a couple minutes as well. But you can see there's just a couple pieces of information. The DMV is not under the DOT, so we've had to develop some interfaces and some partnerships and collaboration with our friends at DMV who are under the Department of Taxation, or our tax commission. And so we've learned how to he partners with them to make sure that this program is successful. And then our commercial account manager, or we'll call it McCam, the way that we do it is a prepaid wallet with quarterly billing, and we'll talk about why that's important in a couple minutes as well. All right, so these are the two, we call them MROs, or mileage reporting options. And one is an odometer photo where they just take a picture of the dash, as you can see in the picture, or the other is telematics, which come directly from the car. And the reason why I'm revisiting this is that initially we thought when we put these, we provided these options, that it would be maybe 1/3 telematics and 2/3 odometer. And you can see it's basically 50-50, which, as you can see there on that third bullet point, the odometer, I'll call it, for lack of a better crude term, I call it dumb ruck, and that is it only costs $7.20 a year. And you look at telematics, because our commercial account manager has hired yet another sub to go to the yet another sub that goes to the OEM, and that is like 5 times more expensive. And going back to what I said when I started this slide, we expected about 1 out of 3 people, not 1 out of every 2. And so it has increased costs for us. And yet we believe that this technology element, telematics, keeping that future forward focus, ideally at some point in the future, when all of the conditions are present, we will be able to use that telematics to do different policy levers, like helping people understand, which route to get home is less congested and less expensive for them, and to allow locals maybe even to compete for that trip based on the local option tax on RUC going through their communities as well. And so we see a lot of potential in that. And so right now we consider it an investment. But if we wanted, if it became imperative to lower costs even more, we could just go to the odometer photo piece until the telematics technology arrives to be used.
Lyle, a quick question. This is Ann. Or Senator Johnson Stewart, does somebody have to manually look at the odometer photo and then enter the data, or is it automated?
There's some machine learning involved. There's basically 2 steps, and one of them is I have my Ford F-150 Lightning in the program, and so basically first it takes me to an app. I have to take a picture of the dash so that the machine learning can verify that it is indeed a Ford F-150 Lightning, and then I have to go in on the odometer, and then it uses those 2 pieces of information to verify that it is indeed correct.
Thank you.
All right, so moving forward with the flat fee, the registration fee versus the road usage charge mileage rate, or the RUC rate we call it. So you can see how it has evolved and will evolve, and we'll talk about that a tiny bit more in depth later. But the whole point is drive less, pay less, and that is the voluntary aspect. And we've had a very consistent percentage of EV owners through the program who believe that they could pay less by being in the program, because it's geared towards about 13,500 miles a year. So if you drive less than that, it's conceivable that you could pay less. And instead of paying it all up front at registration, for some people, it may be advantageous to have to pay to get to pay that in quarterly installments, even if they do max out at the cap. All right, so here you see our flat rate and our RUC rate over the years. And you can see initially in 2020, we started with a RUC rate of 1.5 cents per mile. And then we moved forward. You see in 2023, the legislature lowered it in part to induce more EV adoption because of our air quality issues here in the Salt Lake Valley. And then we've been slowly through the legislature and through CPI, increasing it to where we are today at 1.11. On January 1, it'll go to 1.25. And then, back in 2032, you'll see that the RUC rate will finally get back to where it was in 2020. And so I'll talk about this a little bit later, but this does still, even today and in 2032, represent a significant discount to what it would be compared to a gas tax neutral. All right, so here you see the evolution of the RUC program enrollment. We started in January 2020, and you can see we had just over 1,000. We went through that first couple years, and it was pretty static. And then last year, we transitioned to a new commercial account manager, and you can see there was some opacity there while we did the new integration. And then we went in March with about 5,500, and we came out with over 8,000. And then today we have over 11,000. We're adding about 400 plus participants every month now. And then you can see that we have some legacy hybrids and plug-in hybrids that are grandfathered and slowly transitioning out. And the point of this slide is that regardless of what's happening, we're scaling whether we want to or not, adding 400 people a month, and 1 out of every 5 new vehicle registrations being an EV. It's incumbent upon us to learn and learn fast. All right, and so this is the piece that when we did our pre-meeting with Representative Elkins appeared to be important, and that is what have we done to reduce costs in the program? And you can see through that first 4 years, our revenue, we did a significant amount of investment in the program to find out what was working and what wasn't. And when we completed our first contract, we identified several things that I'm going to talk about in subsequent slides that optimized the program. And one of those was transitioning to EVs only. And we were very pleased that last year we were in the green for the first time. All right, so this is a closer look, and you can see that it's the same slide as before, but now we have an FY26 projection where we believe that our goal is to continue to reduce that expense ratio. So right now, at the end of this year, we anticipate to have 17,000 customers by the end of our fiscal year next June, and that our expenses to revenue ratio will be about 56% of revenue. And then one of the interesting things about our contract is that there is a significant volume discount once we get to 50,000. And so we just wanted to show that once we get to that, we believe that we will be able to get expenses down to about 7.5%. And then I'll remind you that includes the telematics piece. If we didn't have telematics because it's not ready yet, or we choose not to, then that would be reduced even more. All right, and then here we have just a comparison. We originally thought that you wanted us to do something similar to what Virginia shared with you last month. And so just so that you can see how this compares our RUC revenues to our regular flat fee revenues, you can see it's small, but growing. All right, and then this is the piece that we're really proud of, and that is that Utah learns. We originally, in the first couple of years of our contract, we had quarterly reporting and quarterly payments, and we had monthly reporting and monthly payments, and we chose to move that to quarterly, and that has significantly reduced expenses and the complexity and the responsibility that falls upon our customers. And then We went to odometer capture via the smartphone. We used to have OBD2 plug-in devices. They were expensive. They were kludgy. They tracked location. You couldn't turn it off. And we don't do that anymore, and it has been a significant improvement. And then we obviously, as more and more OEMs provide access to their telematics, it gets easier and easier for us to be able to go straight to the car. And in fact, interestingly, I mean, we are just completing our second year of a 5-year contract, and already just in the last 23 months, technology has advanced so much that now, instead of going through 1 or 2 third parties to get information from the OEMs, now vendors are able to connect natively to either the car directly or straight to the OEM without having to go through a middleman. And so that is not part of our contract now, but we know in the future that we will be able to reduce our expenses by eliminating middlemen in future contracts. And then you also see system improvements, quarterly mileage totals with the wallet and no location tracking. We just do miles now. No additional information is being collected. And then we continue to fine tune and optimize the registration experience, because that's how it happens. We chose not to, I'll call it, struggle with the New Auto Dealers Association in terms of trying to get access for customers to be able to enroll at point of sale. The program right now is available at the first anniversary, because the New Auto Dealers mentioned that it would increase friction that would elongate and maybe even prevent the sales of EVs. So now at the 1-year anniversary, when they go to renew the registration, the DMV has a pop-up that says, hey, there's this road usage charge program where if you drive less, you can pay less. And then they can click the button to send them over to our program. All right. I mentioned earlier that right now the road usage charge or the RUC rate is a discount to the gas tax neutral rate. And you can see here, we have 2 different rates, what it would be. Again, we are at 1.11 cents per mile currently. We're going to go to 1.25 cents on January 1, and it would be either 1.16 if that RUC rate is offset by the revenues generated from our EV charging tax at public EV chargers. If you pay to charge at a public charger, there is a 12.5% EV charging tax that is added to that charging session. And if it's not offset, then it would be 1.84 cents per mile. So you can see there's still a fairly significant benefit to driving an EV in terms of the contribution to the transportation, the road system. And then things that we're looking at moving forward is obviously we're to continue to reduce and hammer out inefficiencies and expenses. And then the other piece that we hope to be able to do better moving forward is we've got now some customer experience professionals on staff at UDOT that are helping us to put in, I mean, something as simple as when they go into our website and they look around, when they before they leave, we ask a simple question, and that is, did you find what you were looking for? Thumb up or thumb down? And if it's a thumb up, then we let them go. And if it's a thumb down, then we have one more question, and that is, what were you looking for that you didn't find? So that we can try to continue to provide a better user experience for people who come to visit. And then obviously, I just mentioned the point of sale piece. Ideally, at some point, we make it easy enough for somebody who wants to buy an EV to also enroll in RUC at point of sale. The other piece is interoperability with other states. I heard I think it was one of the senators talking about trying to capture road usage charge or sales tax or gas tax from visitors, and we want the same. And that also, obviously, the other side of that coin is that Utahns traveling elsewhere would also be responsible for paying or helping for the use of other states' transportation systems. Another piece that we're dealing with is we get a ton of text scams. I know you guys don't get that in Minnesota, where people are texting your citizens and claiming that they owe tolls or
Oh, we get that.
We get it a ton. And one of the things that we're doing is we have a program that's soon to be announced called My Utah, where the governor's office is putting together, has a team that's putting together a website where everything that a Utah citizen does to deal financially with the state of Utah can be accomplished in one site. So instead of going to the DMV, instead of going to UDOT to pay your road usage charge, instead of going, somewhere else for a permit, you go to My Utah and with My ID, all of the things that you do to interact or purchase goods and services or things through the state, through government, can be done through My Utah. And so it would be very nice for us, we believe, to be able to say, if you can't pay for it in My Utah, then it's a scam, full stop. And so to make it really simple for people to identify or to disqualify people who are claiming that they owe money. Obviously, we want to support the vendor community. Right now, we have a single cam. Oregon has multi-cams. And so we're monitoring that situation closely to see if competition in the vendor market would add value and or decrease costs for our program. And then, as I mentioned before, we want to preserve and optimize that technology potential for the policy levers that it creates or protects. And then one of the other things that we're seeing, is the RUC rate. We want it to be consistent. We want it to be predictable. And then we also want it to be indexed for inflation and things that people would normally expect to see out of a product that's static with a changing price. And that is the end of my...
Nope, there's one more slide. At least we do. We have one.
That was just for informational purposes. We spent some time and energy doing a quick consolidation of those 4 states so that you could compare and contrast, but I'm not necessarily going to talk about that today.
Well, that is very helpful, so I appreciate that you gave us that. So members, on the last page of his presentation, there is one final table. And again, thanks for that consolidation of materials. That's helpful. All right. Was Leif going to talk, or can we
No.
open to questions?
He is here to keep me out of jail, and because he deals with the legislature and has been through the process of how we got here. In the event that it gets to nuts and bolts, he's going to, like I said, help me stay out of jail.
That's a helpful.
I do want to say that I applaud your efforts. You're looking at this. And just to hearken back to our legislative side, showing our pathway, I want to emphasize that it's our legislature that led this. It took some time, and they studied it, and they looked at it, and ultimately determined this might be a pathway worth considering because of where we're at on the gas tax and how important infrastructure is. We want our funding source to be viable and take care of our future needs. And so I think it's awesome you guys are looking at this, and we are more than happy now and in the future to help you, to provide information about our experience. We want you to be successful. if you choose to go down this route. And hopefully we're successful together. But anyway, just wanted to add that. So.
Yeah, thank you, Leif. It is really important that we learn from all the work you've done. So I'm grateful for that. And boy, Utah's been more than willing to guide us through some of your trials, but also your successes. So thank you. With that, I think we'll open it up. Do we have any questions? Representative Elkins has a question. Representative?
Questions and comments? Just a note to begin. Minnesota is also implementing a single sign-in system. It's called Login MN, and it is being burned in now with the Department of Employment and Economic Development as part of the new paid family and medical leave program. So once they have tested it out and make sure it works, it'll start being rolled out to other state agencies as well. So that one is already in the works. Next, I really want to thank this team.
Get closer to the microphone. Yep.
I think it may be having trouble with this mic. Can you hear me? Is this
Yeah,
better?
now
It's
it is better,
now?
yeah.
Okay. I
Thank
just
you.
needed to wiggle it. But I've been going to school on Utah for several years now. A couple of the Utah legislators, Kay Christopherson, Wayne Harper, I consider them personal friends at this point because I've been working with these guys for so long. But my House File 1140 is basically built on the Utah experience. Like I said, I've really seriously been going to school on these guys for years. And I wanted you guys to hear this presentation because when we heard from the Virginia team, one of the big questions that arose was the cost of administration. And because Utah is on like their third iteration of this, they've done make tremendous strides in figuring out how to get the administration costs down. So we would want to start where these guys are right now, kind of bypass where Virginia is right now. And House File 1140 does have a fiscal note that does reflect the implementation costs. And I would really like it, I don't know, Assistant Commissioner Zhang, if you and Eric from MnDOT could give a presentation at one of our next meetings to talk about what your evaluation has been of the Utah-style implementation, because what the fiscal notes have been reflecting, and this is the second or third iteration of these bills that I've had, is that because Oregon, Utah, Virginia, Minnesota all use the same Fast Enterprises driver and vehicle services module, that integration with an administrative system has already been done 3 times, and so the fiscal note is reflecting an implementation cost of like $200,000. I don't know, we'll hold him to this, but I think it was like, we could do this in 2 months, but please give us a little more time for that. But I'd like to, at a subsequent meeting, hear from you guys about what your assessment is at this point. So if they're kind of going to school and all of this, but the bottom line here is that we do have an option for charging EVs a fair road user charge, and it's practical and becoming relatively cost effective.
Thank you. Other questions in the room or online? Okay, we've got a couple. Margaret, go ahead.
Thanks. Thank you. Margaret Donahoe with the Minnesota Transportation Alliance. I was just wondering if you've calculated, because the RUC charge does not equal the fuel tax, how much revenue this.
I think we have
Yeah.
a system problem in here.
Is there a timeline? You talked about in the future having it be revenue neutral and indexing it, but is that going to happen for sure, or is that a goal for the state?
Lyle?
It's a goal for our program. However, it's a policy decision on the part of our legislative partners. As we mentioned, there right now it appears that the policy emphasis is in EV adoption and cleaning air. And at some point, if the legislature chooses, as you can see, it indexes or it resets. There are two times in the statute that it resets, and The first one is January 1 of 2026 when it goes to 1.25, and then again in 2032. And it may be that the legislature chooses to update that between in the intervening 5 years based on whatever policy decisions that they choose to make. And I guess the other thing is, one other thing I wanted to add is that then the legislature also in the statute gives our Transportation Commission the ability to change the rate, and we could then be self-determining.
Okay. Margaret, do you have a follow-up? All right, we have one question online, but I'm going to go to Jim first and then Tony in the room. Jim?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jim Pearson with Excel Energy. I just had a point of clarification. So on the slide that talks about no credit for EV charging tax and then a credit for EV charging, you meant, did I catch this right? So if I'm using a public charger in Utah, that there's a percentage sales tax on that of 12%?
12.5, yes.
12.5%. So it's on the total bill, not on the kilowatt hour?
Yes.
And then my last question is, does the state of Utah have a general sales tax that's different than 12.5%? Or how did 12.5% get chosen?
I'm not sure how that amount was chosen. Leif may have some background. It is in addition to one of the things that we recently found is because we have some EV chargers that were installed under the VW settlement program, and it's the sales tax plus the EV charging tax. So that makes it about a 20% tax on an EV charging session. And I think Leif would like to add something.
I was just going to mention the way some of that played out in the legislature was that we had a task force that was just looking at transportation funding options. And that particular 12.5% tax on the actual charging, on the price of charging, it's administered just like a sales tax, was kind of seen as, hey, we need something that can potentially address the gap of those who travel in Utah who may not live here. And the thinking was that most people who live here are charging at home. And if you're charging at home, then that 12.5% tax is not administered. That would be a nightmare to try and administer. And so you tax just at the commercial charging stations thinking, hey, you'll get the folks that come to travel to Utah, travel through Utah, and they'll still pay a certain share to the state for the use of the roads. And so that was just kind of some of the policy debate around that.
Is that good, Jim? Okay. All right, let's hear from Tony.
Thank you, Madam. Let's try this again.
That's actually a mute button, but we are
Yeah.
having problems with the mic.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Tony Quillis from Quick Trip. Lyle, you had mentioned when you were talking about odometers and telematics, local option tax. How does that work? Is it where the vehicle is registered for the odometer and the telematics?
No, it would be location based. So we recently completed a pilot program with some federal funding where a certain number of RUC participants agreed to share their location data. And then we had RUC rates that were unique to the localities that they drove through to see if we could, if it was workable. And mostly it is. So basically, in the future, in the future, when one could surmise that with enough information, like you already have Waze that's telling you how long your estimated trip is going to be and suggesting alternative routes. Well, one other factors that could be included would be that your ruck rate would be lower if you go through this locality that's having a sale, and it reduces congestion because it gets you off the highway. So those are some things, some interesting policy decisions and technological advances that could be available in the future that we tested and look like they have some possibilities.
And then, Madam Chair, just one, well, two within one. What are your, what's the current revenue you're raising right now? Do you have the numbers in 2024, what you raised on this EV tax? And then part of that is what's the major part of your expenses?
All right, so the first part is the EV charging tax, and I believe, Leif, you can help. I believe it's several million, 2 million so far in FY 26, the current fiscal year. And the second part of your question, remind me, please.
On the expenses, what's the, when you go through and you talk about expenses that have been going through for administratively, is that just for the contracts with the telematic companies?
Yes, and it costs for the odometer, and then there's implementation costs, and there's a cost per participant.
All right, thank you. And then of the 2 million you said that you've raised in fiscal year 2025, is that all dedicated to roads, or how is that?
Yes, it goes directly into the transportation fund.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Good. All right, one more in the room, then we'll go to Anjali online, and then we'll come back to the room. Laura Ziegler with AGC.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Laura Ziegler with Associated General Contractors of Minnesota. Thank you for your presentation. You started to answer one of my three-part questions. So does UDOT bear the cost then of the CAM component, or do you directly bill that to the user? And this is in reference to the mileage reporting option selection slide.
Yes, that's an ongoing discussion and a good question. We earlier in the presentation that I gave to the legislature a couple months ago, we had a similar a slide that showed what the cost would be in the ruck rate. The change would be, or the difference would be in the ruck rate if that was internalized or externalized to our customers. And so that continues to be an ongoing discussion. And for the time being, we have chosen to internalize that cost.
Laura?
Thank you. Just a quick follow-up from that. So when you were talking about the telematics option being more popular than the odometer photo, right?
Yes.
What assumptions were made there? Was it privacy? Was just the make and models weren't as expansive? And then on the flip side, why do you believe more people chose that option?
Your assumptions are correct. We thought that people would be more protective of their perceived privacy. I mean, as we know, those in the room, you can find out a lot about somebody from their Instagram, their Facebook, their LinkedIn, but don't you dare know anything about me, government. And so we assumed that because it was a government program that they wouldn't want to know and we were pleasantly surprised that, but it also might have something to do with the fact that people who are buying EVs now are more comfortable with that tech forward approach.
Yeah, and maybe I'll just add, when you use telematics, it's a lot more seamless for the person because they don't have to do anything. It's like the sales tax, you just go to the store and it's paid and that vendor remits it and takes care of the whole process. Where if you're doing the odometer, you have to do something. You got to take a picture and send it in. So
Yep, that's a good point. Laura, it looks like you have one more question.
Thank you. No, that's.
Okay, we're going to go online with Anjali Bains. Anjali, introduce yourself.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Hi, all. My name is Anjali Bains. I lead the transportation team at Fresh Energy, a clean energy policy advocacy group based in Minnesota. Thank you for your presentation. It's really interesting. I was curious. I have two questions. I was wondering if you're aiming to move all vehicles, both gas and electric, to a road user fleet or similar, kind of as the gas tax continues to decline as the vehicle fleet increases in efficiency. So that's my first question. And my second question was, how did you calculate I think there was a gas tax fuel neutral rate for the RUC rate. I'm curious how you calculate that specifically. Is it based on like an average gas vehicle fuel efficiency, which I would suppose would change over time, or was there another methodology for calculating that? Thank you.
So
Lyle?
I'll answer your second question first, and that was there was a little asterisk that talked about it assumed a state tax fuel tax rate of 40 cents per gallon, average mile per gallon, vehicle of 22, and 13,884 miles driven per year per vehicle. So based on that calculation, that's where we came up with the 1.84 cents per mile gas tax equivalent RUC rate. And then what was your other question?
Yes,
The
if
first one.
you are considering
Oh.
changing all vehicles to this model in the future.
That is part of what we call RUC 2.0. And I mean, that's one of the things that Leif alluded to earlier, and that is we've been working on this for over 20 years. And we, the cool thing about being in government is that there's no competition, it's co-opetition, right? And so we shared our plan and our future roadmap, and Virginia stole it fair and square and implemented it. And so Virginia, for the most part, is doing something very similar to what was in our RUC 2.0 plan. And that's going to be up to obviously policymakers. And so what we view our job is just to try to make sure that intellectually and academically, and that should they choose to move in that direction, that we have the guardrails set up and the calculations ready to move forward. But right now, it's EV only.
Great,
Okay.
thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I think we'll have one more question in the room. Oh, a few more. All right, we're going to go to Nick. We do want to hear from our last presenter. So if we could make these last three, so we'll go to Nick, then we'll go to John, and then we'll go back to John. Oh, and then Representative Elkins as well. All right.
Thanks. Nick Lardner, Minnesota Management and Budget. So my understanding is RUC is capped at the flat fee. Have you done an analysis on how many users hit that cap? And then second, the lost revenue from how much people would pay if they exceeded that cap? And then second, the difference between people who don't meet that cap and then the lower user fee?
So the number of people who hit the cap, not very many, because people self-select. We have about 17%, and it's been consistent, 17% of the total EV population in Utah is in the program. And again, they self-select because they think that they drive less for whatever reason, they work from home or whatnot, that they can beat it. And so there are very few people who actually cap out, we call it. I'm one of them because one of my performance measures is to increase the program. So I'm in there and I cap out every year, but it helps keep the numbers up.
All right, Nick, is that a good?
What was your
Good
last question?
Wondering about if you've done an analysis on the lost revenue between how much you would have earned if there wasn't that cap, and also how much you would have earned for the people who don't meet that cap, what they would have paid under the flat fee?
Truthfully, we have not, because it's a hard cap. I mean, the point being that you're not going to pay more than you would have paid otherwise if you'd done the registration fee. We did do an analysis, and I presented it to the legislature. So if if you get your information to Danny, I could share that presentation with you, because we did do it as an analysis to determine what would happen if we removed the cap. It was interesting because there was, it was almost punitive because everybody else is paying, the registration fee, which is the de facto cap. So if you remove the cap in the RUC usage charge program and you have a few people who exceed it, then they volunteered to pay more, which isn't necessarily the goal of the program, which is drive less, pay less.
I think we'll get that presentation from you and we'll post it on our working group website. Thank you. All right, three more questions in the room. John Thorson.
Excuse me. Thank you, Madam Chair. John Thorson, LiUNA. Two quick questions. One, you mentioned the 12.5 cent sales tax that's being captured. Does that go to your equivalent of the highway user tax distribution fund? Does it go to roads and bridges, or does it go to the equivalent of a general fund?
My understanding is that it goes directly into the state transportation fund for roads and bridges.
So both the tax and the fees go into your highway fund, both of them?
That's correct, which is why we did the analysis of the RUC rate with the EV charging tax offset and without, because they both go to the same place.
Okay, and then my second question relates to slide 17 with the future state fuel tax neutral RUC rate. Is there a different fuels tax rate for RUC enrollees, or is it the same rate?
I'm not sure I understand your question, because if you have an EV, you're not buying gas. So.
Sure, okay. But in terms of is there a different rate for a RUC enrollee when, let's say they have to charge at a public station?
Oh, no. Which again, is the reason why we calculated the two different RUC rates, because we don't really have good information yet in terms of how much, like Leif mentioned, that the national statistical rule of thumb is that 80% of your charging is done from home. And so we assumed that 20% of the charging was at one of these chargers and may merit the offset of a reduced RUC rate. And so that's why we put that together, in case the policymakers chose to take that into account.
Thank you.
I think on slide 17, I have some questions too. So I think I'm going to follow up with you, Lyle, and maybe in teacher mode at the next meeting, go through exactly what that means. So John Houseland.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Again, John Houseland with the Minnesota Trucking Association. Heavy-duty trucks are a long ways away, but we're certainly seeing the emergence of Sprinter vans, which is a different class of vehicle. I'm curious, in your costing and fees and schedule, do you have a breakout of schedule by type of vehicle, or is it just flat right now? And yeah, how are we handling that?
Now you're getting into some really interesting edge case scenarios. And you see our neighbors to the east in Colorado with and we'll call them like just not Sprinter vans, but the Rivian Amazon delivery vans. They imposed a delivery fee on trips for deliveries with those vans. I think, like a simple Google search will indicate that one of those Amazon Rivian EV vans does over 100,000 miles a year. And if they were in the RUC program, or they're paying just the regular $143 registration fee, they are deriving a significant benefit compared to the use of the asset that they're paying for. And so we right now we're just trying to make sure that we have everything down for light duty, and we and the Sprinter vans and your Rivian vans are getting a smoking deal based on either being in the program or just paying the registration fee compared to the amount of miles that they drive.
Thank you. One more question in the room, and then we'll move on to Matt Cernick. So Representative Elkins?
Thank you. Mostly answering questions here. So Ms. Donahue asked questions about, the calculation and distribution of the funds. So in House File 1140, Matt Burris developed a formula for me that there are actually 5 classes, not just one. So a sedan would pay a lower rate than a pickup truck, for example. And the rates in each of they're based on the 5 EPA vehicle classes for which the EPA calculates average mileages on an annual basis. And so for example, the sedan rate would, a electric sedan would pay a mileage rate that is equivalent to what a typical sedan would pay in gas taxes if driven the same number of miles over the course of the year. So there is some reflection of weight mileage into the formula. And all of the revenues would go into the Highway User Tax Distribution Fund. And it is based, the 5 rates are based on the state gas tax, so they're indexed to the state gas tax. So as the state gas tax goes up, with inflation, the mileage rate for EVs would go up in lockstep. So those are all questions that I've thought through and are reflected in the current bill. And I have already started thinking about the Rivian vans.
Good. All right, we're going to move on in the interest of time. Thank you, Matt, for being patient, and you've been here since 9 o'clock, so we appreciate it. So our last presentation, and don't worry, we're not going to go through things if we go over, okay? So we'll just move those off. I do ask that for your patience, if we're in the question answer and we go past 11, I would ask for those of you who can stick around, we want to hear everything Matt has to say. So Matt comes to us from Thermo King, and he has a presentation that you have in front of you on energy use for vocational and off-road applications. So thank you, Matt.
All right,
Go ahead.
thank you. Thanks, Madam Chair, working group members. Thanks for welcoming me here this morning. So my name is Matt Cernick. I'm a principal electrification engineer at Thermo King. So if you don't know who Thermo King is, you might learn a little bit more about that this morning, but I'll try to concentrate on some of our aspects that I've done, kind of becoming aware of this group as a personal EV owner, but as I started to follow what the activity was, saw some opportunities to bring forward some notes on how vocational and specifically transport refrigeration is used for energy consumption, how taxes are applied today as far as off-road use goes, and to just talk a little bit about what the potential of electrification is as we move forward with the technology. Let's see, is it that one?
Do you have to do it, or can he?
There we go.
Okay.
Got it.
Okay, great.
So Thermo King's part of Trane Technologies. So Trane Technologies originated about 5 years ago as a consolidation of a couple different companies coming out of Ingersoll Rand. But Trane is the HVAC, commercial and residential company that you'd recognize. And Thermo King is commercial transport refrigeration. We've got about 34 manufacturing locations worldwide, large employee base, and really trying to challenge what's possible for a sustainable world. Thermo King's history begins in Minnesota. So we've been innovating here in Minnesota since our founders, Fred McKinley Jones and Joe Numero, originated transport refrigeration in 1938. Prior to that, they were cutting ice out of lakes and rivers. So that's how the technology has evolved. 1938 seems pretty recent, really, if you think about refrigeration. But the advent of transport refrigeration really enabled everything from fast food to big box grocers to being able to have fresh fruit and vegetables here in Minnesota in the wintertime. Thermo King has a history of innovation through introduction of diesel technology in the 1960s. Also, one of the first electrified units was introduced in the 60s, and hybrid, although it wasn't a term then, has been available since 1963. We've moved into added connectivity, other carbon reduction emissions technologies, including very low emissions diesel technology. And as you'll see here in the next slide, electrification has been our focus in new product development here over the last several years. As was alluded to, smaller class vehicles are where things are possible right now for transport, refrigeration, electrification. The Sprinter vans, the smaller class 2 through 4 trucks. However, Thermo King does have units working on class 6 and 7 for straight truck chassis, and we've also been able to implement some hybrid operation on trailer. Trailer seems to have a lot more possibilities from the flexibility standpoint, and as we've seen in the past, we've had a lot more evolution as far as our products go within the hybrid realm. That goes for our Tri-Pack product, which enables the truckers to be able to park and have hotel loads while they're at truck stops and not run the big diesel engine. Even going to electrification for hybrids and all-electric buses, including the light rail transit that goes by here. If you're comfortable in the bus, it was due to our Thermo King units. So a little bit of history here. So the motor fuel excise tax has been implemented here since the 1970s. I think maybe this committee has covered that before. And off-highway business use applications of the tax were allowed to be refunded. In the latest, policy here for electrified vehicles or electricity as a vehicle fuel tax, these off-highway applications really weren't considered for refunds. And the technology is evolving. There's a lot of understanding here onto what these applications are and how fleets are going to use it. But I think it's important to consider how technology is changing and continue to change. We've seen both the Federal Highway Act implemented. We've seen Minnesota introducing tax credits in the 70s in the rebate program. We've seen energy policy here in the 1990s show alternative fuel source. And then we've also seen the red dyed fuel implemented here, which will become a little bit more important in the next slide. There is a form, and this is a little bit of research that we've done. I have a great research team at our Trane Technologies group as well to help me look into some of this. And this PDR1 form really enables the rebate program for normal road fuel use in off-highway applications. So red diesel enables enforcement. It helps the policy being able to know where revenue is collected. It allows the enforcement and the inspectors to be able to determine proper use of the off-road fuel. And it's a clear designation for the users where red dyed fuel is used off-road or in transport refrigeration, which is on-road, but it's off-road. There's a little bit of and that's where things get a little bit confusing as far as policy goes. And of course, you can't dye electricity red. So as we look at distinguishing use cases between the types of fuels, electricity versus combustion fuels, we have to find a way to designate that fuel for what its application is. So as we look at the cold chain applications, we see a possibility of significant tax impact as electrified transport refrigeration continues to be adopted. And the example here, and I can go through many examples, but I decided not to get too much into the engineering detail today. But if you look at a standard transport refrigeration unit on a trailer, we run about 0.7 gallons per hour. So if you look at that, and if the user was just to buy clear diesel fuel, pay the applicable tax rate, they'd be somewhere in that, $550, $565 for 2,500 hours of operation, which is pretty typical. For the TRU right now, electrified TRU, around 8 kilowatt hours per hour with that, 5-cent tax rate, assuming that they've gone to public charging to acquire that energy, you're looking at about $1,000 impact. So, again, without the rebate, the farmers, the grocers, the users of these of this equipment will end up paying more for using on taxes than using the fuel, right? So that's kind of just an example there. Again, we're seeing adoption of electrified transport refrigeration, in areas where it makes sense. But we are seeing mostly behind the fence energy connections right now. And again, that models a lot of private fleet use of on-site fueling. But we definitely see where corridor charging is being built out without accommodation for differentiation between on-road and off-road use, but also missing connections for transport refrigeration, for trailers and other things like that. This is the PDR1 form. I won't get into this a whole lot other than it accommodates off-road use, including construction, agriculture. It also accommodates power takeoff. So that is where a shared energy source that's probably running on regular diesel fuel from a truck is used to run off-board or accessory applications. And I have some examples of that, but that's one thing to track here. Biodiesel blends, transit and ambulance, and transport refrigeration units are specifically called out on that form. There's also ePTO. So as we move into electrified vehicles, there's the opportunity to share that on-road use energy storage source to run accessory equipment. So in this case, you could be running off a common, say, 600 kilowatt hour battery pack, and that energy could be used to mostly drive the vehicle, but you could also be running the transport refrigeration equipment or any other accessory load. You're powering onboard equipment, or you're powering offboard equipment such as, tools at a construction site, or you're using the energy from your truck to charge your mini excavator or your other equipment on site, similar to how you would see that fuel transferred today. Again, this is kind of that example, right? So I wanted to put in a scenario that, kind of reflected some of the use case here. So you have a contractor driving an electric pickup truck. He's pulling his electric, skid steer. He stops to charge both of those pieces of equipment. One is on-road, one is off-road, but the pump looks the same. The dispenser looks the same, right? He also has the option of being able to take that energy, as you've seen from some of the vehicles available today, and transfer that energy from the vehicle back to accessory operations, to another vehicle, or to tools, or to a residence, or to a job site location. These are examples of PTO applications or self-powered applications. So again, these are trucks you see every day, or maybe you don't see every day. Some of this is invisible, right? You don't notice this until you notice this. So I guarantee today, if you didn't know the name Thermo King before, you'll be looking for Thermo King on the fronts of trucks and trailers. You'll understand what transport refrigeration is all about. These are some,
Wait,
other
Matt,
examples of.
I have a quick.
Yep, go ahead. Yep.
Sorry, it took me a while to formulate my question. So powered takeoff, does that mean that, or is one of the applications that there's I'm looking at the concrete mixer truck.
Yep.
So there might be there was a plug-in that you could plug, is that what it means? Power takeoff means you can take power off the vehicle, or what does that mean?
Yes. Okay. So with the combustion fuel examples today, that's probably the easiest to start with. PTO is where there's a gear on the transmission of the vehicle that can be engaged when the vehicle is stationary, but provide power conversion to usually hydraulic systems to operate an accessory load. So while the truck is stationary, and sometimes, say, if you were at a job site and there was a mixer truck parked there and they engage the PTO, you'll hear the engine rev up and get to a specific RPM, and that'll spin up a hydraulic pump, and that hydraulic power will be transferred to spin the drum on the.
So you're saying they're using gas or electricity not to drive, but to do some other function on the vehicle?
Right. So in theory, and this is probably underutilized, that the fuel tax rebate today is probably underutilized by fleets, because even that small part of operation could be tracked and applied for this PDR1 form rebate.
Well, you could have a mixer truck go for an hour.
Exactly. Yep.
Huh. Okay,
So
sorry to
there are
interrupt
ways
you.
There are
Keep
ways
going.
to track that using telematics on the vehicle as well, right? So So that's.
Yeah, but you have to be aware of it.
Right,
And you have to have the technology. Okay,
Right.
keep going, sorry
So,
about that.
no, you're good. So again, other examples here of off-road, everything from yard trucks that are stationary within the distribution centers to move trailers around, agriculture, construction equipment, and yard and lawn care. These are all technologies where electrification is emerging as an alternative fuel source. And these applications, if they need access to public charging, or if they have a need to go from job site to job site and access public charging, you want a way of differentiating that. So again, a couple of things to think about here is, how do we look at these ePTO applications? How do we look at mixed use at the public charging stations? Could the vehicles or equipment themselves have embedded identifiers to tell the dispensers on the electric vehicle charging stations if they're an on-road or off-road permitted use? Do we want to do a more manual submission, similar to the odometer, picture taking and submission for rebates? And then, could we look at the PDR1 form to be modified to allow vehicle owners to request a refund as they do today? And again, the PDR1 form seems to not just encompass diesel fuel, it also applies to other alternative fuels like propane, LP, natural gas today. So that is about it.
I'm sorry, it's too much to think about, so we're just going to disregard your testimony.
Thanks.
Just kidding, for the record, just kidding. I do have a follow-up really quick, and then if there's anybody else in the room that has a question. Just the conversation before about the Amazon delivery vehicles, and makes me think of a concrete truck or construction vehicles. I think one thing I'll want to get from Laura Leff, but HC or others, is like, what's a typical mileage on a concrete truck in a year? Because the road user charge would get away from some of this. However, I don't know if we're going to be shooting ourselves in the foot, because concrete trucks, get 100,000 miles a year. I actually don't know what those numbers are. But it's something really interesting to think about. And my real question for you, Matt, is any state accounting for this, to your knowledge?
Not to my knowledge. So there's the road use, electricity as a vehicle fuel as a road use tax. And again, I have experts that have looked into some of the other policies from some of the other states. I don't believe it's being accounted for the same way. But then again, the charging infrastructure is being set up even in states that are implementing corridor-based charging, mostly for either drive-through, like drayage type operations for port servicing, or for trucks as a service where the trucks are parked overnight and charged. And there's really not a lot of other activity going on. So you're not doing a typical truck stop application where the driver's in his cab, and there's a hotel load, and the transport refrigeration unit is running to keep the cargo at a temperature control even when they're not driving. So it's being implemented more as a traditional plug it in, walk away kind of a standpoint. And most of this charging is being installed behind the fence right now, right? And that doesn't really apply for what this
Right.
group is looking at. But as these corridor policies evolve, as I know Minnesota is researching build-outs of commercial vehicle charging, we want to be able to have accommodations for these commercial applications, as well as the off-road use cases, as well as truck parking. And I want to put a little plug in for truck parking and trailer parking too, right? Because there's never enough of that. So.
No, I think you're exactly right. We are not solving the problem for today.
Right.
We're really, and obviously this will be iterative, and we'll continue having to address technology advances, but it is something that I think we should be thinking of. So I really appreciate your expertise. Who's got questions in the room? Representative Elkins, go ahead.
I have to say that this is a use case I had not previously considered, so thank you. But if you look at the ads that like Ford is running on TV right now, where they plug the Christmas tree lights into the truck, But, since the introduction of the Ford F-150 Lightning, they have been promoting the fact that if you're a home construction worker, for example, you could be running your equipment, off the truck. So just observe that this is an issue you don't have if we're charging by mile.
Yeah, I mean, think of all the motorhomes out there that.
Oh, yeah.
They park for the summer but they run their entire household on their one charge. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, thank you, Matt.
Introduce yourself.
Yeah, again, John Houselon with the Trucking Association. I'm really interested, we work with Thermo King for a long time. Obviously, our members use these. Can you talk a little bit about the weight differential between technology today on a diesel truck versus an ePTO? Because I think there's a policy nexus here of even if heavy-duty vehicles aren't going to be fully electrified, if they're going to adopt ePTOs, there may be some weight loss, and there's always this challenge if you don't want to lose load carrying capacity. So would the state need to consider some sort of weight exemption to the maximum weight on a vehicle to offset heavier electric PTOs? So that's sort of the background of it. Any insight there?
Right, so this is one of those engineering conversations that can really get into detail, but thank you, John. As we've seen the technology come from the truck manufacturers, we see some limitations on weight. I think that's been pretty clear. We've seen some exemptions. A Class 8 right now gets a 2,000-pound weight exemption from, I believe that's the National On-Highway gross combined vehicle rating, but there isn't anything for trailers. So as we look at electrifying trailers and refrigerated trailers needing to be autonomous in many cases, where they'll get dropped at loading docks and the truck will maybe go drive to a charger somewhere. There's a lot of different scenarios and a lot of different fleet operations. But I think, in that scenario, we have to recognize that not all fleets will be able to invest in on-site infrastructure as well. So they may have to leave the trailer to be loaded or unloaded while the refrigeration system is running, and then go drive the tractor to a public charging site. So batteries will be needed on trailers. And right now, as we've looked at some of the statistics, we could have about 100 kilowatt hours typical on a refrigerated trailer, and that would cover many use cases, most of the use cases we would see today. But that starts to add up pretty quickly, right? So then every 100 trailers is 10 megawatt hours per day for 100 trailers. When you drive past a typical distribution center, they maybe have 150 trailers there, 200 trailers. So that's 20 megawatt hours just to keep the refrigeration running. We've seen fleets and sites struggle with that even in the past. And like I said, we've developed these hybrid systems and that can be plugged into the grid, even running on diesel today with no batteries. And that takes about 20 kilowatts per trailer as far as that plug-in energy goes. So there are definitely some infrastructure and some weight accommodations. And to get to your point, it's about 100 kilowatt hours worth of batteries, about 2,500 pounds, 2,000 pounds in today's technology. We see possibilities of sharing energy with the electrified tractor or even with a combustion tractor as far as where the electrical energy comes from in a bunch of different hybrid scenarios. But I think weight is definitely a concern, and being able to do some of these accommodations for either the on-road GCVWR allowance, or being able to look at other technologies that would lighten the load a little bit.
You said the acronym really fast. I know the first one was gross.
Yeah, gross combined vehicle weight rating. So that's, you take the weight of the weight capacity of the tractor and the trailer, and 80,000, you hear 80,000 pounds for Class 8. That's the gross combined vehicle weight rating. So that's the maximum amount of curb weight and cargo weight that you
So it's combined.
Yes.
My brain is already exploding. Who else has a question in the room? And we don't have any online. Matt, I'm really grateful for this. Do you mind if we share your contact information along with this?
Yeah, go ahead.
I think I will have some other questions for you.
Thank you. If there's any interest in visiting Thermo King, we're right down in Bloomington, 90th and Lyndale. So I'm still here in Minnesota. All of our engineering and technology is developed right here with manufacturing throughout the world. So.
Well, thank you. And what you've given us is some more things to think about, just like the other presenters today. So thank you very much. I think in the 2 minutes we have left, I will just encourage you to continue to get those ideas to us. Mine have to do with tax credits and purchase exemptions for federal government, et cetera. Today, I thought of a few more that have to do with maybe looking into a BRT pilot project, explored development of a home meter for level 3. That's something I've been talking to the university engineers about. There's just a lot of ideas out there, and I want us to all be able to see each other's ideas. Maybe it will help us to come up with our own ideas that kind of branch off of that. So continue sending those. Our next meeting is on January 5th, right after the holidays. We'll be here in this room at 1 o'clock. And so I look forward to discussing some of our ideas then. We do have 2 more minutes. Does anybody have anything that they wanted to add? Okay, so I encourage you to continue. And then if I did record one idea for a presentation, we will continue to have presentations in January, but I think we're getting to the point where we really have a lot of data and we can start putting together our recommendations. So I don't have to ask for a motion to adjourn, right? All right, with that, I'm going to adjourn. And we'll see you on January 5th at 1 o'clock, right here. Happy holidays, everybody. Wow, that is a lot to think about. I think road user charge has to get away from all of this.
I think yes, but I would have to think if there's anything else that we're
Missing? I know, it's not easy. Yeah.
What is the rest of your day look like?
Well, it's finals week, so I have to meet with students, but I am available. I mean, I'm gonna be sitting in a lab as students come and.
We can always connect with this with directors. Thank you.